Hello, we're back. Hey, today we're talking about some of the types of DNA profiling analyses that can be done. We've already talked a lot about this first one here, the STR analysis of your regular nuclear DNA. So we've already covered that bullet point, looking at STRs. But what we're going to look at today is STR analysis of the Y chromosome and also mitochondrial DNA analysis. And then we'll look at these other three bullet points at a later date. All right, so let's look at what happens when you look at the Y chromosome and the STRs that are on that Y chromosome. So if you remember, you have, 46 chromosomes total, and 2 of those 46 are the sex chromosomes. So if you're a girl, you have 2 X chromosomes, and if you're a boy, you have an X and a Y chromosome. So on that Y chromosome, you have certain STRs that can show up. Remember, short tandem repeats. And the Y chromosome is only inherited from the father, right? Because you gotta be a male to have that Y chromosome. So that father passes down his Y chromosome to all of his sons, excuse me, and then they pass that down to their sons, and it just keeps going and going and going, right? So that all the male descendants from this one father are going to carry that same Y chromosome and its unique STRs. So if you consider this chart here, which is called a pedigree chart, and these show up quite a bit in genetics. So if you're studying that, they use these often to show kind of like how a trait or maybe a disease is passed down from, the parents to the children and then to their children. And you can kind of use that also to help you analyze what would be the probability that a certain kid would have a certain disease or trait. But anyway, what we're going to use it to look at is these pedigree charts. Is to show how certain DNA basically is handed down to children. So you have to know a little bit about pedigree charts to start with. So the squares on here represent the males and the circles represent the females. So up here at the top, here is like the dad, and here is the mom. And so the dad has a Y chromosome. The mom does not, right? So that dad, and this line means, okay, here's the mom and dad, and they're connected. And then this line here connects all of their kids that they had. So they had a son here, this dude. They had a daughter. And here's another daughter. And another son. So, and then you see that those, their offspring had also, were married to other people, and then they had kids, and it keeps going. So the dad will pass down his Y chromosome with its STRs on there to the sons only, right? Because only the sons are going to have that, XY combination. So sons will have this. The daughters would have XX. So they don't have a Y chromosome. So here this guy gets it, and this guy gets it from the father. Okay, and then when this son gets married, it looks like that son had 3 kids, and he had another son and a daughter and a daughter. And so this kid also has the same Y chromosome as the grandfather, right? So here's the grandfather, the father, and the son. All right, now this daughter didn't get it, so that line has no Y chromosome. This daughter didn't get it either, but this son got married to this lady. They had a son, so this son had it also, and he married a lady, and they had a son, and this kid also has that Y chromosome. So that's kind of the way, the male Y chromosome gets passed down to all the males in that family. And because these Y chromosomes tend to have a low mutation rate, they don't show a lot of change from generation to generation. So we can kind of look at their STRs and kind of look at the paternal ancestry. Paternal means, from the father. So it's one way of connecting up fathers and sons and showing that they're related. Okay, now you see this word here, haplotype. So if you're considering the DNA sequence that you get from one parent, that's referred to a haplotype. And more on that later. Okay, so this is the Y chromosome. STRs show like the paternal ancestry of a person. Okay, now here's some awful people. I don't know any other way to say it, but this guy here is Saddam Hussein, and here are 2 of his sons, Uday and Qusay. So this guy was the one who was the mastermind of 9/11 and the attacks on the United States. So in 2003, they couldn't find him for a long time, right? This happened in 2001. But in 2003, they finally found him. He was hiding in a hole, basically. And the military needed to confirm that the person that they had found, that they thought was, Saddam Hussein, was actually him, right? So obviously, if they had him in custody, they could get his DNA. They could get a sample of it. But they didn't have like a reference DNA to compare his DNA to, like they didn't have a file that said, this is Saddam Hussein's DNA, so that they could just go, oh, well, that matches, that's got to be him. But what they did have on file was they had his DNA and his DNA. So they looked at their DNA, and guess what? They looked at their Y chromosome of the 2 sons. And then they could look at the Y chromosome of the father there, Saddam Hussein. And they could compare the sample of the DNA they got from him to the DNA that they had on record for the 2 sons. And what they found was that Y chromosome matched up with the 2 sons. And so they concluded that, they had the father and they had Saddam Hussein. So, there you go. So that was one high profile case where they used Y chromosome STR data to confirm that they had a certain suspect in custody. Okay, so switching gears over to looking at mitochondrial DNA analysis. We talked about that a little bit before, and rather than being linked to the father's side, now we're looking at the mother's side and inheriting, certain traits in DNA from the mother. And so that is called maternal ancestry rather than paternal. Okay, so we know that the mom is the only one who can pass along what we call mitochondrial or mtDNA to children. And remember, mitochondria are those little organelles that you find in all the cells of your body. And they're kind of, we always think of them as the powerhouse of the cell, right? So they're where the cellular respiration takes place in cells, which provide energy for all your bodily functions. So within those mitochondria, there are little rings of DNA, and that is passed from mother to all of the mother's offspring. It's a little different than the Y chromosome. So here we have another pedigree chart. And so we have the father and the mother, because remember the squares are the fathers or the males, and the circles are the females. And so they have, it looks like 3 kids, right? They got this kid right here. So they had a daughter, and they had this guy here. They had a son, and then they had another daughter. And each of these kids are going to get the mitochondrial DNA of the mother, right? And then those daughters here, this one, are going to pass on their mitochondrial DNA to their children. So this lady passes on her mitochondrial DNA to another daughter, a son, and a daughter. This one, the son, cannot pass on the mitochondrial DNA, right? Because it only comes from the mother. So the mitochondrial DNA for this guy's wife gets passed on to their kids. So not anything from this mother up here. But this daughter has the mom's mitochondrial DNA and passes it on to this son and this daughter. Okay, and remember, the reason why you only get DNA or mitochondrial DNA from the mother is that the egg cell has mitochondria. The sperm comes in to fertilize the egg. The sperm head does not have a lot of mitochondria in it. Most of the mitochondria in the sperm is in the tail to provide energy for movement of the sperm. So you get all that mitochondria from your mom, but not from your dad. And now the thinking is that if any mitochondria that might have made it into the egg gets destroyed from the father. It's not a lot in the first place. So anyway, so you get most from your mom. Okay, so kind of like the Y chromosome, the mitochondrial DNA has a low rate of mutation, so it's pretty consistent from generation to generation as well. Okay, and remember, only the girls can pass on the mitochondria to their children. Okay, so taking a little closer look at this mitochondrial DNA. So here's kind of a schematic. So here's your cell, the basic cell in your body. And within the cell are these organelles, right? Endoplasmic reticulum, you know, and other stuff, vacuoles and the nucleus and all this crazy little dots, ribosomes, Golgi apparatus. And here is a little mitochondria. And within the mitochondria are these little circles of DNA, and that's what we call mtDNA. So it looks a little different than the DNA that's in your chromosomes. Okay, so the deal is that there are 37 genes that are on these circles of mitochondrial DNA. And they have over 16,000 nitrogenous base pairs in those genes. There are a lot of copies of mitochondrial DNA that are inherited in an egg cell, about 100,000 copies. So there are a lot of copies of this mitochondrial DNA. And so what scientists do is they analyze two regions within the circular DNA that are called regions of hypervariability. So it's slightly different than a STR, but it's a region that varies from person to person that they can check out to see if your mitochondrial DNA matches up with, crime scene or suspect or whatever. Okay, so these two regions, HB1 and HB2. All right, here's a close-up, like microscope picture of a mitochondrion. That's the singular, mitochondrion. So each mitochondrion has 2 to 10 copies of that mitochondrial DNA, and you have up to 1,000 mitochondria per cell. So that's a lot of copies of mitochondrial DNA. Okay, so that circular structure actually makes it less likely that the DNA will degrade over time. And nuclear DNA, though, we know is subject to degrading because of heat, improper storage, or if it's taken from burned or buried bodies. Often, if that nuclear DNA is degraded, then scientists will consider the mitochondrial DNA instead. Okay, because your cells have thousands of copies of that. And so we can use this to identify, war veterans that they don't know who it is. They can use reference samples of mitochondrial DNA from relatives to help to try to identify these war veterans and other missing persons. And we can also use our friend CODIS, remember the whole database that is linked in at a national, state, and local level that we talked about last time. And along with some YSTR information if the person is a male. All of that can go into identifying missing persons. All right, now I wanted to talk a little bit about this interesting case, and your book talks about this too. The case of the Romanov family. So this was, basically Russian royalty. And they ruled Russia for 300 years. So it's quite a long time. Okay, so this guy, Tsar Nicholas II, so this is him right here. Nicholas. So he ruled over 180 million people, and he had a lot of money. He was supposed to be worth $45 billion, and that was back in 1918. So there's a whole story about them and the wars that they were into and all of that. But there were people who, needless to say, didn't like their family that much. And so this is his wife here, Alexandra. And then they had, let's see, 4 daughters, and then this little boy right here who would be like the next Tsar. So he was going to, inherit that title from his father. Well, there were people called the Bolsheviks who did not like the Tsar, and so they captured the family, and ultimately they killed them. So they think they shot them, and if they didn't die when they shot them, then they, stabbed them with a bayonet or something like that. And then they buried them in kind of together in some mass graves. They didn't know where they were, though, for a long time, until the late 1970s. And they found one of these mass graves that had 9 people in it. And so, using a team of people, they, exhumed the skeletons eventually, although they were held kind of secret until the Soviet Union actually, sort of dissolved, under, oh, now I'm forgetting the name of the guy that had the big blotch on his head, who was kind of friends with Ronald Reagan. No, I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. It's really bad. But anyway, under that guy, the Soviet Union eventually dissolved and then became Russia. So in 1991, finally, these 9 skeletons that were found were exhumed, and then using STR analysis, this whole team of, anthropologists and forensic odontologists and all these people concluded that the remains were of the Tsar, his wife, and then 3 of the daughters. The son was not there, and then either this one or this one was not there. So his son's name was Alexei, and then it was either Maria or Anastasia. And if you read in different places, some people will say it was Anastasia that they didn't find, and some people will say it was Maria that they didn't find. But I think the problem was they weren't sure which one was missing. But they did conclude that it was this family. Okay, so along the way, and by the way, the other skeletal remains in that grave were some servants and a doctor that was with the family. So it was interesting because there were people who claimed to be Anastasia, one of the daughters, who was thought to be missing still. So they claimed that, especially this woman right here, whose name was Anna Anderson, she claimed to be the Anastasia girl, she claimed she wasn't killed and she escaped, and many, many people thought she really was her for like 60 years. But in 2006, 2007, they found a second gravesite and figured out some more scientists, more DNA analysis, and mitochondrial DNA analysis. They figured out that these were the remains of the missing 2 children. So they found the boy and the girl, Anastasia. And so this lady, she had already died, but she was proven to be a fake, even though she fooled a lot of people. So it's an interesting story, and it's a good case study in using forensic science in general and also DNA analysis. Okay, so next time I'm going to have you guys watch this program, which is about the Romanovs, and it's from the National Geographic channel, so it's pretty interesting. But it kind of gives their whole story, and it tells you a little bit more about the DNA analysis that was done on the exhumed bodies, which were basically bones. So how do they do that? Okay, but that'll be for next time. All right. Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye.